There is a big and common misconception about the story of David when it comes to when Prophet Samuel, or when Samuel the prophet, when he went to anoint David as king while he was in his father's house. And it is so powerful that when you see that misconception, it completely changes the way that you see the story of David. You see, contrary to what you might have been taught or told, or what you might believe about what actually happened in the story, Samuel the prophet did not actually tell anybody that God had sent him to anoint David as king of Israel. No, he didn't tell David. He didn't tell David's father, not David's brothers, not any of the townspeople, not any of the elders who were gathered. Nobody. Read the story again. Nobody knew that David had been anointed as king that day. They knew that he had been anointed as something, but they did not know what he had been anointed as or what it was for. I mean, think about it. Why would they think that? They already had a king, Saul, and nobody knew that God had rejected Saul as king. Because contrary to how you might have envisioned or read the story, when God told Samuel to go and tell Saul that he was no longer king, it was in private that Samuel conveyed that message to Saul. In fact, it was so private that after delivering the message to Saul, Saul, the now rejected king, still asked Samuel to go out with him in public so that the people would still think that he, Saul, was king. And Samuel obliged him. Samuel did that. So, as far as everyone knew, Saul was still king. Samuel anointing David, as far as they were concerned, was for something else, and it definitely was a mystery. Maybe it was to be some sort of priest, maybe to be a prophet, perhaps even succeed Samuel himself, because Samuel was getting along in age at that point. Maybe it was to be a special kind of holy warrior. You know, this was a young nation. Nobody knew, but nobody thought that it was to be king. Saul had sons. They would assume that it was going to be, from father to son, it was going to be Jonathan. Think about it for another minute. If Samuel had announced to everyone when he anointed David as king that he was anointing him as king, do you not think that the news would have reached Saul immediately, and that Saul would have immediately killed both Samuel and David? In fact, that was exactly what Samuel said to God when God told him to go and anoint David as king in the first place. He said, Saul will kill me. If Saul hears about this, he will kill me. And then God gave him the sacrifice subterfuge strategy. Tell them that you're coming to offer a sacrifice instead. Nobody, least of all David, knew what he had been anointed to be. So he went back to doing what he was doing before Samuel came along and anointed him, which was being a shepherd. He was a shepherd boy. Now, I have told you all of this to set the scene, because here we have David. He could write poetry, as you can see from the Psalms, a lot of which he wrote while he was yet a shepherd. He could play the harp. In fact, he could play the harp so well that they sent for him from the palace to come and play the harp for the king. You know what that made him? The best harp player in the whole country. So he could have easily become a musician. That's number one. Or number two, he could write poetry. He could play the harp. That's 1 and 2. And then he was a very skilled fighter. In fact, he was a projectile warrior, perhaps the best projectile warrior who lived in his day. And everybody knows the story of David and Goliath and how he killed the giant with a slingshot. He could have been a soldier, a projectile warrior. In fact, he did become a soldier in the army after killing Goliath. So that is skill number 3, projectile warrior. And then, at the very least, he was a skilled shepherd. He was a skilled shepherd who was killing lions and bears all by himself, and he didn't lose one single sheep. That is skill set number 4. And now, on top of all of that, Samuel had anointed him for some secret and prestigious role that no one knew what for, or no one knew what it was about, but it was surely for something great. Samuel the prophet just didn't show up anywhere for no reason. The story says that when Samuel showed up in the town, the elders of the town were very afraid and worried, and they started asking him, we hope everything is okay. I mean, Samuel, a whole Samuel coming to our town. So Samuel anointed David, or Samuel anointing David, was a big deal, even though it was a mystery destiny or for a mystery cause. So that is number 5. Options, options, options. And yet he was sent back to the lowly position of being a shepherd boy taking care of his father's sheep. Can you imagine if that was you or I? Life just took you up in front of everyone, only to throw you down again in front of everybody. After all of your confusion about what to do with your life, seeing how you could write poetry, you could play the harp, you were a skilled projectile warrior, you could be a great shepherd, you didn't know what to do, and then the universe seemed to answer your prayers, only for the excitement to fizzle out and for you to find yourself back where you started, which now was worse because now you know that you have a great destiny since the great prophet has anointed you, but you have no way to fulfill your potential, and to make matters worse, you don't even know what you're supposed to be fulfilling since you can do many things and several things very well. So how do you keep your sanity through all of this emotional roller coaster? How do you not only stop yourself from going mad or insane trying to figure out what you're supposed to do, but how are you also supposed to feed yourself and your family? Questions.